Okay.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to Civil Justice. My name is Joshua Berglan, and today is going to be a very special broadcast. God, I've got chills just like shot all through my body just now. This category of broadcast is not one I do a lot of, but if you paid attention to my work over the last 2 years, I've shared the stories of several people that have been locked up behind bars. In fact, some of them we've gotten in trouble for sneak recording some of the interviews, like James Heydrich and some other people. And we have a recording on my YouTube channel of a care conference of one of the inmates that are locked up under civil commitment. Now, when I say inmate, that's not technically their term, because technically they're a patient, but really they're locked up in a shadow prison. And some of you all have heard of civil commitment through celebrities like Britney Spears, but there's another level of civil commitment that happens, and it is a gross injustice. And I can sit here and repeat myself 100 times over. I've got video after video, testimony after testimony. I've got exposing the doctors and nurses that work in these facilities. You've heard the testimonies of people like James Heydrich at Coalinga, and several men, people being denied their religious rights. Just story after even this is the one that always screws with me. And those of you who don't know, I worked with complex disabilities for 18 years, and I'm extremely passionate about fighting for people who are disabled, not just physically, but also mentally. And because I'm one of those people, FYI, I'm one of those people. I know what it's like. I know what it's like to struggle with mental health issues. And the one thing I've been blessed with is a great physical health. But that's the health that we can all see. We can see when someone's physically not right, right? So when you have somebody that is morbidly obese, that is an amputee, that's in an ill-fitting wheelchair, and let me say that again, ill-fitting wheelchair. That statement alone, some of you won't even understand why those words matter. That is a very expensive and gross mistake. And again, because an ill-fitting wheelchair can cause decubitus ulcers, and not to get into the science and the expense of healthcare costs, but I'm telling you, you're paying for this. You're paying for these crimes that are happening behind these walls of these civil commitment facilities. You're all paying for it. I'm paying for it. You're paying for it. And here's the other thing. What you're going to hear today can happen to you too, because it's happened to a lot of people have never been charged, that have been locked away for 30 years, 20 years, 10 years, people that have had their childhoods removed from them, people that were mentally ill to the point where they didn't even understand what they were doing, and because of the things that were happening to them. Again, story after story after story. So I'm going to shut up, because I've said all I can say about this, and I want to bring as much attention as possible. And I thank God, I thank the creator of all, that I've been able to do these broadcasts, and little by little there's people that are willing to speak up, people that have seen the injustice firsthand, that are employees of these facilities. And I don't know how many facilities there are total in the United States. I think there's like 30, could be wrong. But today, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, so I'm going to be very careful about saying the facility that she's from or she's worked at. But we have a firsthand account of somebody that is going to testify to some of the gross, horrible injustices that happen. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I'm going to pronounce her name wrong. I'm going to try one more time because I don't want to disrespect her. Taisa? No.
Taisa.
Taisa. Oh
Close.
Taisa Mick. And Taisa, I want to commend you for your courage, and I apologize because we said this 15 times before the name. We went through saying your name, and when I hear things, sometimes I don't always hear it correctly, and that's another conversation. But I admire you a great deal for your courage, because look, there's a lot of people that have had a lot of opportunities to speak up and they won't, and there's a reason for that, which I know.
Yeah.
But God bless you for your courage, and thank you so much for being here. And I just really want to give you the floor to share what's on your heart, why you reached out to me, and I'll shut up now. Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Taisa Mick, and I worked at Larned State Hospital in Kansas for 5 months. So as of 2 weeks ago, I'm no longer working there. So when you first start your job there, and I was a therapist, when you go through new employee orientation, they try to scare you in a way. They tell you to watch out for the SBTP residents, that they're extremely manipulative, that they've been there all day, that they'll try to set you up. And some of that might be true, but they make it seem like all of those residents are like that, like they're all nefarious. However, that could not be further from the truth. What they don't tell you is the human side of those residents and what goes on in the facility, which I was baffled by. I didn't know that places like this existed. I don't even know where to start. It ranges from how these residents are treated by the staff, by therapists, by people who are in charge of their treatments, to policies constantly changing, unethical policies as well, to the lack of medical care, and even the food that they eat. I mean, it's just all around a bad situation. And this is supposed to be a treatment program, and many of the residents were told when they first got there, by a judge, it should be 2 to 5 years on most, but really no one makes it out in 5 or even 6 years. That's extremely rare. Most individuals there have been there for over 10, 15, even 20 plus years, which is unjust because with civil commitment, they have already served their time in prison. And some of them even did decide to go to Larned for further treatment because they felt that they needed it, but they didn't know that they were setting themselves up for a lifetime sentence. I'm not sure where to start. Do you want to ask any questions, or do you want me to?
Yeah.
Go
Well,
ahead.
what I'd like for you to talk about is, because you said some of them, they go to prison first, but not all of them have
Not
actually
all of
been to
them.
prison, because not all of them have been actually formally charged with anything, correct?
Or have even committed any crime. Like, for example, we have a resident who's on the spectrum, and he never committed a crime, and he actually called on himself. He called the police and said that he was having thoughts. And so he was civilly committed, and he's been there for years and years. I mean, at the end of the day, how much treatment can someone get, right? And they make it seem like those individuals are there because they're program resistant, because they're too comfortable, because they're not working the program. But that's not it at all. It's because the program is set up in a way that makes it extremely difficult to advance. There's objective criteria.
What happens, would you tell everybody what happens if somebody denies treatment, but what happens, no, not deny treatment. What happens when they accept treatment? As far as one of the stories that I'm trying to avoid putting words in your mouth because I'm familiar with these stories. Can you talk about how the finish line, the carrot, how the goalposts are always moved back, so to speak?
Yes. Oh my God.
Goal.
Yes.
Well, and you reach that goal, but no, you didn't really reach it. Can you talk about that?
Exactly. There's no objective criteria when it comes to moving forward. You can do everything that's asked of you, and they can still find any reason to deny you. They can say, well, we'd just like you to work on this issue, on your trauma, a little longer, even though you've been trying to move forward for the last 6 years. They will deny you movement forward due to your room being messy. That'd be an example of that. Or they might just say that they don't feel like you're ready to move forward, and they might not even give you a reason. Some residents, as soon as they get closer to the finish line gets moved forward. There's just no objective criteria. And that's disheartening because there's no motivator to move forward. And as a therapist, at what point, I'm sorry to use this term, but do you keep blowing smoke up their asses and telling them, just try harder and you'll move forward, you'll make it to tier 2, you'll make it to tier 3, when that's not the truth. I mean, you can try as hard as you want, and at the end of the day, the people who get to decide whether you move forward or not, it's up to them.
Can you talk about the malpractice? In other words, say you have somebody that's disabled, physically disabled, not mentally disabled, but physically disabled. Can you talk about those conditions for the disabled?
Yeah, so at Larned we have 3 different buildings. We have Isaac Ray, we have Dillon, and we have Young. And Young is the building with the intellectually disabled, lower functioning individuals and geriatrics, especially those with medical issues. And those who are intellectually disabled or who are on the spectrum, they get written up the most. They get in trouble the most. I mean, we're always getting emails about them. The people who take care of them, the nurses, the MHDDs, which are CNAs, they're not very well equipped to take care of that population. This is definitely not a population that should be in an environment that is prison-like. Yeah, it's just not a good environment. An example of this, when we talk about the geriatric population, we had a resident apply to move to Tier 2, and one of the consideration about possibly denying him movement forward is that he used a walker. If he goes to Walmart, is he going to be able to move fast enough away from children or from a high-risk area? So actually, this takes me to the outings. If a resident does make it to Tier 2, which to make it to Tier 2, after you've done all that's been asked of you, you have to apply to see the panel. You have to submit an application. And then it goes to 3 rounds. It goes to treatment team, where all the therapists and staff discuss whether or not this resident's ready to move forward. Then it goes to clinical, which is another meeting where we go in depth about the resident. And then the panel, which is there's 20 people on it, 20 to 25, 30 at times. And a lot of these individuals have never met the residents in person, but they get to decide whether or not they move forward.
What?
Yep. And so in the chance that they do move forward, that they start doing outings. And the outings, they start on our campus cafeteria where they go and eat. And then as it progresses, they get to go to Walmart or Dollar General shopping. They're shopping outings. And they're extremely stressful. Actually, this is extremely stressful, especially for those who have high anxiety levels. And this population has been institutionalized pretty much. Individuals who've never been out in 12 years, who have only been out to go to doctor's appointment. Wow. And by the way, when they go to doctor's appointment, they're shackled. So, which is also stressful. So when they go on their outings at Walmart, there's a lot of rules. They have to stay away from high-risk areas. Okay, that can make sense. And this is for those who have offended against children, and those who haven't offended against children. It's a blanket policy for all of them. And so when they go shopping, a resident got in trouble the other day because he was at Walmart and he was minding his business and he was focused on, whatever he was shopping for. And a kid ran behind him and he didn't even see them. And that was a huge deal because he didn't see the kid behind him, and that's points docked. What? And so, or another example is a resident was done with their outings and then they went back to the state van and they didn't notice that right next to the state van, there was a car with a mom and a child in it. And he got docked points. So they're making it to where it's so counterintuitive because when those residents go on outings, they're making them hyper-focus on the children, right?
Yeah.
So if they're in an aisle, there's a family that walks their way, they have to go to a different aisle. If they're in a restaurant eating at a table and a family sits by them or anywhere near them, they have to get up in the middle of their meal and leave.
Really quick. What are your qualifications? Are you a therapist?
Yeah, I'm a therapist. I'm a licensed master level psychologist.
Okay, very
Yes.
cool. So
yes.
you're qualified to speak on this.
Yeah, I mean, that's not evidence-based treatment. We went to a conference. It was called ASA, and is a conference for the treatment of individuals who have committed sex offenses. And everything that I've learned there, none of it is being applied at the state hospital at all. I mean, it is not good at all. I mean, there's no words for it. The residents, when they're getting ready to go on outings, they should be excited, but they're really nervous because they can get in trouble for anything. So they have to constantly be on alert. I mean, the other day I was in treatment team and I'm just sitting there baffled because they're talking about, did this resident see that he pointed out at the train and there was a park behind the train while they were driving. And he was like, oh, look, it's a train. but there was a park behind it and he didn't see it. So they spent 20 minutes discussing whether or not he saw the park behind it and whether or not he should get points docked. I mean, it's ridiculous, the things that we're focusing on.
What's that have to do with healing?
It's shame.
They are all sex offenders. Like, how is that treating anything?
No. I guess it's teaching them to stay away from high-risk areas, but really it's just teaching them to act awkward and more suspicious than anything. Because anytime they see a child, they just get scared because they don't want to get in trouble.
I don't know if this is an actual medical term, but what you resist persist. Like, I've always heard that in my life, and doing emotional intelligence training and other, personal development work I've done, even my faith, what I resist will persist. But if I'm willing to face it head on, then I have a chance to heal it because I can confront what's happening.
But it's so ridiculous because that even applies for those offenders who have not done anything against children. And we're forcing them to focus on kids, and we're creating more pathology. I mean, when we go and deliver mail, it's ridiculous. As therapists, we sit there and we spend hours marking the pages before we go and deliver the mail, that we have to sit next to the resident as he goes through the newspaper or the magazine and rips out anything that's childlike, any pictures of children, including baby Jesus, anything childlike. So that can include toys, bobbleheads, I mean, anything. And it's so time consuming. It's so shameful for them too. I mean, that it's not treatment.
Now, how can you talk about, and I know other facilities have had a massive issue with death. Coalinga has had, I think, 70 deaths this year or something insane.
How many?
MSOP, can you talk about, because you can only speak from the place that you worked.
Yeah.
What's the issue with, is there a death problem there? In other words, just people dropping like flies and nothing being done with it?
I mean, the best way to get out of the program, I mean, it's sad to say, but it's to die in the program. That's how you graduate for the most part. Residents will vouch for each other on, please give him the medical care he needs. My friend's really struggling and you have to go to the nursing station multiple times. I mean, there's so many times where I had to go to the nursing station and say, hey, this resident hasn't gotten their meds. Hey, can you double check on this resident's script? Hey, can you make sure they're getting the proper medication? And the time that I was there in 5 months, I think we've had 2 or 3 residents die. And that's pretty sad. And the sad thing about it is that we had a resident who had COPD, and he was always in the infirmary, and it was really sad to see him every day there struggling to breathe. And his therapist said, well, he had plenty of opportunity to get out. So, I mean, if he's dying here, that's his problem. It's his fault, which is a complete lack of empathy.
Okay, let's talk about, I don't know if you can answer this question or not, but from what I've heard from other stories, from other people that have worked in the facilities, I don't know if this is happening in Kansas, but I know it's happening elsewhere. Is there abuse of the patients from the employees, the care staff?
Yeah. I mean, because some of the staff, when they first start working there, they're told to watch out that these individuals are criminals. And so some of them are treated as criminals. Some of them get written up by the staff who's on the floor and who doesn't like them. It's documentation falsification. They can get in trouble for anything. I mean,
what about
mental abuse?
There's what
it's mental abuse. It's not a therapeutic environment. And I have a little list here because they had just came out recently with tons of new policies. And really, the guidance is when they come out with a new policy, they're supposed to make the residents aware of it 5 to 10 days before the implementation of it. And that hasn't been the case. They'll come out with a new policy and the next day, the policy is implemented. And lately, in the last 2 months, there's been a lot that's came out that's made the residents pretty upset. We've had a new polygraph form. So residents have to take a polygraph every 6 months to move forward, which polygraphs aren't even acceptable in court, but they have to take it. And, many people can lie and pass a polygraph, which have those residents who have anxiety. and who just get nervous. So they fail their polygraph and they can't move forward, even if they're telling the truth. And they came out with a new polygraph consent form that residents had to sign to be able to even take the polygraph, which means if they don't sign it, they can't move forward. And the polygraph form allowed them to be recorded, audio and video recorded, and for the results to be sent to any entity that Larned chooses to send them to. And so they're pretty upset about that, but they don't have a choice. So many of them just had to sign it under duress. We had a bathroom cover policy stating that residents can no longer cover their windows on their door, not even when using the bathroom, which leaves them at risk for getting written up by a staff who, let's say, doesn't like them or is targeting them.
What if they're an exhibitionist, though? Or like, what if to play? So wait, but hold on. If it's a therapeutic environment and we're treating sex offenders, what if I got off on people watching me use the restroom?
Well, they probably get written up if they're using the bathroom. Those who get off on that and those who are just simply using the bathroom.
That seems like a contradiction.
Mm-hmm. And the reason that they came out with this policy is because we had a resident die on the toilet. And this was right when I first started working there. And it's because they're supposed to be doing room checks every, I think it's 30 minutes, 15 to 30 minutes. And they had a shift change and they didn't do checks for an hour and a half. So, and the room check can even be just knocking on the door and making sure the resident's in there or is okay. And he was left in his room dead for an hour and a half. So then they implemented this new policy, but that doesn't really help anything. And then we had the funds policy. Let me see if I have it here because I'll just read it to you. And this was one that the residents were pretty upset about. And it said, due to legitimate governmental interest, all residents must complete a sexual predator treatment program financial disclosure form upon admission to SPTP. Anytime accounts are added or closed. And they have to do this at least every 3 years. So specifically, they have to include banking information. So credit card, debit card accounts, any financial investment accounts, any retirement accounts, checking and or saving accounts, veterans benefits, trust accounts, storage units, real estate, rental, owned properties in one's own name or a business they are affiliated with, or any other accessible accounts in which the residents may have access to or receive money from. So meaning even their spouse's account or parent's account. So residents must provide a copy of voided checks for any associated account. They must provide pictures front and back of all credits and debit cards, and they must provide detailed account information for any of the mentioned categories.
What?
But the bank, and some banks are pretty upset about that because, they tell you to not give your card number to anyone else, but the facility is requiring now. And you can't tell me that's not punitive because if the residents refuse, they can refuse to fill it. But if they refuse to fill it, then they're non-program compliant. And they can be denied advancement. They can lose their jobs if they have a purple badge, So yeah, and a lot of them are pretty upset because when someone steals their information, that they've had that happen before, where staff stole their financial information.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of stories about that.
I wouldn't be comfortable giving all of my financial information to a facility like this, nor would I feel comfortable giving any of my family's information to a facility like this.
And it's really easy to say, well, what about their rights? But they don't have rights.
They don't have rights.
And the proof, but here's the problem with even that. The ones that have not been charged should have rights.
And I asked, what's the purpose of this policy? And the response I got was, it will be good for them. Okay. And then later on, I was told, it'll hold them more accountable, help them save money. Because once they get to reintegration, they need to have at least some money saved. But that's not the right way to go about it. They come up with all these policies and they don't explain the reasoning behind it. They just come out with it. And when residents are asking for more explanation, they then come out with this policy stating when the facility makes an administrative decision that applies equally to all persons and there is legitimate governmental reason for the decision, notice of the decision is all that is required. So pretty much saying that we don't have to explain to you why we made this decision, just that it's a new policy. And then after that one, they came out with a grievance policy because we have residents who do write a lot of grievance, which is their right to do so.
Yes, they do.
Yes, and it said if you write more than one grievance regarding an incident, you're at risk of getting a notification or getting written up for it. So they can only write one grievance about an incident. They can't write more than one, or they can get in trouble for it.
That's like when your abuser says, after they're done raping you or abusing you, and then they have a gun to your head and they say, if you say a word, I'm going to kill your family.
Yeah,
That's
I mean,
the same
yeah,
thing.
pretty much like that. We have a resident who's on 90-day restriction because he kissed his girlfriend on the cheek while she was visiting him. And so he can't see her for 3 months. He can only see her on Skype until he's off restriction for kissing her on the cheek. It's against the rules. It's ridiculous. I was baffled by all that I saw. Resident get in trouble for speaking up. A resident can do everything. They can complete treatment successfully, do all their classes, do their relapse prevention plan. But if they're one who speaks up, who is honest and truthful, then they get in trouble for a negative attitude or for program bashing.
Why are you speaking up when so many others won't? Because I've had, you're the second person from that facility that's reached out. One didn't want to talk. Out of Texas, I've had multiple people reach out, but they wanted to hide their identity. I mean, there's the people that want to expose are afraid to. Why?
I mean, it is. It's terrifying. They will intimidate you. I think at some point there was an article that came out about this facility, and they had sent emails to all the employees telling them that they couldn't talk to the media. Not only that, but they couldn't talk to their legislators. And the governor actually spoke up on that and said, that's not right. You can't do that. That tells you, why wouldn't you want your employees to talk to the legislators? What are you trying to hide?
Why are you not scared?
I'm terrified, honestly, but I think this is more important. I guess for me, there was no way for me to follow my code of ethics, rightly so, and do what was asked for me while I was there. An example of that I had to do, and I wasn't happy about it. I had to write a notification for a resident, and another therapist asked me. And it was for something that had happened last quarter. He had missed 2 or 3 classes, 3 group sessions, because he was having seizures. He was on one-on-one, and he didn't submit excuse notes. And you have to submit excuse notes if you're going to miss a group. And so next quarter comes around, and she noticed that, and she was like, well, I want you to write a notification for this resident. And the reprimand would be them losing their purple badge, for them losing their job, for not submitting excuse notes for classes. And I felt horrible writing it. And I wrote it, and I told my program administrator, I don't agree with this. And I told the resident, I had to write this. I don't agree with it. I 100% recommend that you appeal it too.
Are you worried about them wrecking your career because you're speaking out, or have you already found a place to land professionally?
Yeah, I do private practice, and I have another job in the works right now too. But the residents.
Wait. Say that last part again.
I have another job in the works too as well.
Okay.
A lot of the residents told me, if you care, don't show that you care too much, because they're gonna get rid of you. If you show you care, they're gonna come after you, which is very true. And they've also told me, the people in this administration have no difficulty calling Topeka, which is our licensing board, and lying about you to get black marks on your license. Because if you speak up, yeah. I mean, and the whole time I was there, they didn't like me very much because I would speak up. Like an example, one time I called out a property worker who was yelling at a resident, and I was really nice about it. And I just told her, hey, let's take a step back and not, yell at them. And this was a resident on segregation. So it's not like he's about to attack her or anything. Next thing you know, I got in trouble for it. And I was told by the supervisor, the clinical supervisor, and the assistant clinical supervisor that individual had been working there for years and knows the rules, and that the resident is trying to triangulate. Also, come to find out later that same worker had 3 sisters in the chain of command. So lots of family members working there, lots of favoritism. If you show empathy, if you show that you care, that's a red flag. They'll call it a boundary issue. One time, I said I felt bad for a resident. And another therapist came into my office and she said, I know you're doing your shiny thing around here, but I've been a therapist for a long time, and these residents are here for a reason. I know you like your job, but I'm worried about you. Just because I said I felt bad for a resident, you know. So showing empathy, saying you feel bad, people will get pretty ticked off. And I said I felt bad in response because what had happened is that resident got caught making out with a staff member, and that resident got in trouble for it.
But not
And
the staff.
yes, and the resident gets blamed for it. Okay, and this is a CNA. We have the CNAs who are on the floor with the residents at all time, and you know they also hire CNAs straight out of high school who are 18-year-old, 19-year-old, 20-year-old, who have no training in this field to work in a sexually violent treatment program. You have the workers coming in with shirts that say, you know, don't text your ex, not wearing a bra, not wearing appropriate attire. But then when they're having relationships with the resident gets in trouble. So this resident was on tier 2 and got put on security risk status and moved to another building because he got caught making out with a staff member. And, you know, the therapist said, I'm going to give him the maximum restriction possible. That's when I said, you know, I felt bad for him. And she thought I was challenging her. And so she got upset at me for saying that I felt bad.
Can you share from your perspective, because there's a lot of misunderstanding. I mean, and some that are spot on about sex offenders, but there's a lot of preconceived notions. There's a lot of opinions about it. But from your perspective as a therapist, what are your thoughts on people who sex offend?
So many people, I mean, if you go through the files of 98% of the individual there, horrific history of childhood abuse, horrific history of trauma. So many of them have grown up in the system. So many of them have been in foster care, moved from facility to facility, and been abused in these facilities. And the abuse continues today. You know, they grew up in the system. This population is just so incredibly stigmatized, and I've done a lot of research about this, and I've seen it myself. The sex offender laws, they don't do anything to keep society safe. They only increase stigma, they only increase shame, they only isolate a population. Why should those who have committed sex offense be treated any differently than those who have committed other crimes, when sex offenders have the lowest rate of recidivism compared to other crimes as well? And they're people, you know, when you hear the term sexual violent predator, you think it's the worst of the worst, but that is not the case. You know, rarely have I felt unsafe working with these residents. And I've had individual therapy with them. I've had group therapy. It's just me by myself with 10, 15 residents in a room. And I felt pretty safe. And it shows that, you know, the residents, if they know that you care about them, they trust you and they tell you things. They're honest with you. Mm-hmm. If you feel that a resident is crossing your boundaries, and if you tell them, most of the time they will listen to you. I've had that conversation with a few of them, and they were respectful. You know, rarely do I have to move on to the next step of getting them written up. Rarely, but they get written up so much.
Can you talk? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
They wanted to watch me closely because they said that I fit a lot of the residents' template. And I'm young and I'm a woman. So that was already a huge red flag. A lot of therapists are older too. So since I got there, they're watching me. And I had my supervisor tell me one time, you know, what's so fascinating about this population to you? We've noticed that you veer towards them. And I said, I'm just doing my job. And showing compassion.
Yeah, because most of them that are there are, and I could see as a therapist, and with your background, you're not looking at, that's a sex offender. You're looking at their mental makeup, the person, the mental uniqueness, as I like to call it, especially with people on the spectrum, because people on the spectrum are, I am one of them. We're fascinating people because we see the world through a completely different lens, and we see it through angles that most people would never even attempt to look at it.
And I love working with them because they're the most honest, which is why they get in trouble the most, because they just say it like it is. So they get written up all the time. And they've even told, because I was doing a group with them as well, with the lower functioning guys and those on the spectrum, and they would tell me, you know, if you care, they're gonna get rid of you here soon. So, yeah, it's definitely been an interesting experience, one that has opened my eyes. I didn't know that places like this existed, but now I know, and it's really bad.
How? So what is your specialty as a therapist? Like, who are the kind of patients that you like to work with the most?
Personality disorders, which is why I went to work there, because there's a lot of people with personality disorders. But in this environment is the type of environment that creates personality disorder. That if you didn't have a mental illness, then you're going to develop one because you're getting traumatized in there.
I wouldn't survive 2 minutes there
because I mean, I'd be getting in trouble all the time. And as a therapist, I did get in trouble all the time for just doing my job. So right now, a few weeks ago, we had residents on COVID quarantine and lockdown. So those on COVID quarantine, they couldn't leave their units. So the whole unit was on quarantine. And that's okay. At least they're out of their room. And we can go and distribute homework to them and assignments and talk to them. But then there was those units that were on isolation. So as soon as 5 people tested positive for COVID, the whole unit's locked down and they're all in their room. And they could only come out for 30 minutes every other day for a shower or a phone call. And those are the people who tested positive and negative for COVID. So they're pretty much put on isolation, segregation, pretty much. Yeah, and some of them would be forgotten in their room for more than 24 plus hours. And we have to remind, you know, the staff, hey, you know, this person hasn't been out in a while. They need to come out. And this for 7 to 14 days or more.
What do you know? Do you know anything about an outbreak of HIV or syphilis or anything like that? Or hepatitis, I think it is?
We haven't had one. I mean, there hasn't been one lately.
Okay.
Hasn't been mentioned or anything.
Some of the other facilities are complaining that they think that the staff, they've given them hepatitis and put some stuff in their food. And so I didn't know if you knew anything about that.
And in this environment, the residents do get really paranoid. But a reason, I'd be paranoid too, because the people who are in charge of your treatment don't have your best interests at heart.
Yeah.
Right? So how can you trust them? This administration enforces transparency, but they're not transparent. Right? So I was put in a position where I'm not going to lie to the residents. I'm going to be honest and tell them what I can tell them, as long as it's not, you know, confidential information. But also, I had to make my boss and people in position of power, I had to make them happy as well. And I was told because I was contracted by a third party. So I was a contractor, and my contractor kept telling me, you know, just don't make too many waves. You know how the state is. And but at the end of the day, I'm going to speak up if something unethical is going on. I'm not just going to sit there and turn a blind eye to it.
Yeah.
These are people, they deserve to be treated with respect, many who shouldn't even be there anymore. I think you saw that article I sent you about that Rex Rosenberg guy.
Yeah.
And he's an individual who did a ton of testing for the residents there as they came in. And the number of people who were civilly committed skyrocketed because of his evaluation. I think I have it pulled up here. Let's see. And he developed a demonic survey. And here it is. The survey has developed 2 parts. The first asks people to say whether they've had any 96 experiences that, according to Rosenberg, can be signs of demonic influence. This list includes many things that could apply to sex offenders, such as tendency to commit violent acts, abnormal desire for sex, and compulsive masturbation. It also lists hearing voice, severe depression, and inability to read the Bible. The second part lists behavior and activities that can make people vulnerable to demons, such as fornication, adultery, and holistic health practices, such as meditation. And this man has said it's true that among the evaluators, he's one with the highest rate of labeling people as predators. He estimated it to be 73%. So anyone that got tested by him was civilly committed and is still there. His evaluations still hold weight, and it's crazy.
Yeah, I'm going to share that in the show notes. I've got all those links, and I'll have that be a part of. Everyone will see it in the show notes, so they can see what you're talking about. I am grateful for you stepping up and talking, I would love for you to share with, people. I don't know where, I don't even know what, I guess you're in Kansas.
Mhm.
Would you share how people, if they want to work with you or they want to reach out to you, if they want to interview you, or
Yeah.
just plug your business, plug like anything that you feel led to share, please
I
share.
can send you the link to my Psychology Today
Okay.
page. And people can reach me on there, and there's my work phone number on there as well.
Okay. Because I think that I'm hoping, what I actually hope happens out of this is not only do you get, your business is blessed for it, I hope that more people in the press reach out to you, because there's other questions from, I'm not a real journalist. I'm just somebody that cares.
Oh,
And I use my platform to get your voices out. But, there's people that have real power. I'm working my way to get that kind of power and influence. And I had enough to be able for you to find me, but we need people in power to get aware of this, that can go break these walls down, because what's happening is wrong. And there's so many different stories, obviously, but it takes a lot of courage to do what you've done. And I thank you so much. I'm indebted to you. If we can be of support to you in any way, please let us know. And I really do appreciate you.
Yeah. And, there are many other therapists who have been through the same experiences, some that are much older than me and have been in the field for 20 plus years, who would be willing to speak on this as well. They've worked there and they did everything to change things around there and to be compassionate, and they end up getting in trouble for it as well.
Okay, I want you to answer this question as a professional. If somebody was legitimately a sex offender, are they able to be rehabilitated?
100%. I mean, there's so many reasons. It's not black and white. There's so many reasons why someone may offend. In this program, everyone is treated like a pedophile, but not everyone has offended against children. Some people who offend against children are not pedophiles. Sometimes it is a crime of opportunity. We see a lot of cases of incest. We see a lot, especially with individuals who are lower functioning, or who are delayed. They have emotional congruence with children. So they might be an adult, but their mental age might be, 5, 6, or 7, right? And those people need help, not punishment. There's people who commit offenses because they've been sexually abused, and that's all they've been taught. They didn't know it was wrong when they were younger, but they admit that it is wrong now. I mean, at this point, we have so many people in the program who don't have sexual problems anymore. I mean, they did SOTP in prison. I mean, they did work the program, but after, 5 years, how much more therapy do you need?
Yeah.
They could teach the classes that we teach at this point, honestly. And they've really worked on themselves. In fact, people who have done a lot of progress, and the progress that's been done is despite the program. I had a resident tell me, I don't know if I'll ever get out of here, but at least I know that I did the work that I was supposed to, and I'm working on myself. And it's not for this program, it's for me that I'm working on it.
You're a blessing. I can't thank you enough. Thank you for being here. And again, anything that we can do, please let us know.
I appreciate it. Thank you.